Hi, good morning, and thank you for joining us. I'm Whitney Clavin. I'm a science writer here at Caltech and a press officer, and it's my pleasure to welcome you to Conversations on the Quantum World. This series is hosted by the Caltech Science Exchange and gives us a chance to hear from scientists and engineers who are working on the cutting edge of quantum research. Today's conversation is a little different, as we are joined by Hollywood screenwriter Ed Solomon, who has written numerous films, including Men in Black, the two Now You See Me films, and most recently, the crime noir thriller No Sudden Move. He got to start writing for Laverne and Shirley, which is my personal favorite, and The Gary Shandling Show, and he co-wrote all three of the Bill and Ted movies, which involve time travel. Ed will be talking today with Caltech's own Spiros Michalakis, who is a mathematical quantum physicist and has served as a science advisor for Marvel and the most recent Bill and Ted movie, Bill and Ted Face the Music. In addition, Ed and Spiros previously joined forces to create a short film called Anyone Can Quantum, in which Paul Rudd challenged Stephen Hawking to a game of quantum chess. We're talking with Ed and Spiros today about the role of science and entertainment and how they work together to find a balance between scientific accuracy and science fiction. Ed and Spiros, thanks for being here.
Thank you. It's great
Thank you for having us.
So let's start out hearing a little bit about how you two know each other. Spiros, why don't you start off telling you how you came to work together?
Yes, actually, it was a common friend of ours, Hunter Matz, that put me in touch with Ed. And within an hour of a text message between us, Ed was like, why don't you come over to my place in Santa Monica? I'll cook you dinner. We'll have a great time. There'll be this Zen monk also there to ask you questions about tensors, to like physics things. And I was like, this is going to be a fun night. So we hit it off, I think, and almost made it to Gillian Anderson's house that night, which is something I will never forget. So.
Did we meet on a project? Was it because of a specific project, or did he just think we'd want to?
I think Hunter was just, hey, you two should know each other, which is interesting because usually for a scientist to get introduced to Hollywood writers of any caliber, let alone like, Ed's, it has to happen through the Science and Entertainment Exchange, which is a National Academy of Sciences program. But this was just a parallel universe, just bringing us together. It was outside of that.
What's funny is we've actually now worked together on quite a few things, and we're working together on something right now. A big thing that's been kind of really fun, actually. Yeah.
This is super secret.
It is. I have an NDA, but it's basically a science fiction television show that we're really trying to really put the science in the science fiction. We're trying to get a lot of these big ideas into the cultural conversation, but couch it in just a really, really cool story. So yeah, it's for a television series that I'm super excited about. So
okay, well, that leads to our first question, which is sort of a broad one, is what is the benefit of a collaboration like you guys have? And how do you see that benefiting movies or TV?
I mean, the benefit to me is that I get to meet Hollywood celebrities and people like Ed. No, for me, I think, and the reason why I do this is as a manager of outreach, there's different ways of doing outreach. And when it comes to quantum, it's just so difficult to go to third graders and try to explain quantum entanglement, which we're actually kind of trying to do these days anyways. But I thought it would be really cool to do it through the movies. Hollywood has such a powerful voice to the mainstream. So if you can infuse some of the stories with some cool science, not just facts, scientific facts, but like some really cool science there, and start building a bridge of trust between our side, the academic side, and then the entertainment industry, I think it can pay off a lot. But I don't know, Ed?
For me, what's great about it is usually the real life answers are much more cool than the ones that we sort of make up in our head. And I think all writing benefits from rules. I think rules free you. So when I go to Spiros and go, hey, I had this idea, could we do it this way? And you mock me for a half hour and then
nicely.
And then, nicely mock me and then basically say, actually it would have to go like this. And then I'll go, well, if it has to go, oh, could it go like this? And it actually sometimes springboards, for me at least, springboards me into places I never would have thought I'd go. And the other way we sometimes work is, I'll say to Spiros, and this is something that, by the way, a lot of academics or typical academics aren't so good at doing the what if, because they're trained to do, well, this is what research has shown. But what I love about when I work with Spiros and other people like Spiros is I can say, okay, this is what I need it to be, or I need this emotional result, or this character is going through this issue. How could we then make that happen in a realistic way? And we'll brainstorm together on it. And it's really fun. And I have to say one last thing, which is I would never get to meet so many of the people that I've been getting to meet were we not to have this, relationship. And it's really fascinating for me. And I think we all, we approach our work the same way. And it's just all about trying to have a deeper understanding of what it means to be a human being, really, whether it's through art or through science.
I mean, it is true that we get excited to meet the celebrities in the movies, but then sometimes the celebrities come to Caltech or JPL and they get excited.
Celebrities are far more boring.
Okay, the next question is there a specific example of where you're proud to have worked the science into one of your projects or the narrative and it really worked?
Well, I was actually really proud of the first Bill and Ted when Chris Mathis and I just kind of stumbled on this weird sort of this time travel notion in a very kind of simplistic way. But we really doubled, tripled, quadrupled down on it in Bill and Ted Face the Music, because we actually really wanted to get the science of it correct. I mean, it's just a silly movie. But at the end of the day, we just wanted to be able to say, yeah, but we talked to Spiros about it. And yeah, it's this. So I'm proud of that. I'm really proud of this new one we're doing, because we're actually working with quite a few scientists in all these different disciplines and really building out a world that is hopefully absolutely scientifically accurate, while also being just really, really fun to be involved in. Yeah.
Yeah, and to me, it's not as much about getting the science right, especially when you're discussing science fiction and what could be 50, 100 years from now, sometimes 1,000 years from now. It is about infusing it with cool enough, mind-blowing enough concepts, right? I keep saying to friends from the entertainment industry that you should actually hire more scientists, because we're not just a Wikipedia of facts, right? We have spent decades developing a conceptual metropolis that anyone can tap into to see the connection between things, not the things in themselves, right? Like, okay, and what is the speed of light and all this stuff? Don't bring us on board just to write an equation that nobody will understand, this dead thing, right? Bring us in to breathe life, I guess, into the plot. Because that thing that you thought was a dead end is actually very much connected to this other concept, from science, can open up new doors, right? Both constrain you, but also open up creativity.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, I think sometimes people are scared to approach the science, like it's going to be technical and they won't understand. But a lot of scientists like Spiros are really good at being flexible about it and talking about what if and what could be. And that's why I think.
Well, yeah, there is something else also that, if we're being honest as scientists, the very first step in the scientific method is also the hardest one to explain, as in like, well, and this is how you get to truth, because the first step is observation. You have to observe, right? But then there is a very deeply hidden assumption there that you will be capable of observing what is possible, not just what is likely, right? So when somebody comes and says, hey, could this be true? If we're being honest with ourselves, even as scientists, the answer should always be yes. I really do believe if somebody says, could we, invert gravity? Could we time travel, teleport, break the second law of thermodynamics, one of the most powerful laws, right? I think the answer is yes. And what is interesting is to figure out how. Once you assume that it's possible, right, to go beyond it, then you try to understand it, to reverse engineer it. And that's what I love about science, right? It's not about the pursuit of truth. It's more about the pursuit of understanding. The moment you think you have come across truth, and that it's also so much connected to movies, right? It's not about the pursuit of a singular truth. It's about an interpretation, your connection to the story. And from your point of view, you get to understand it in a new way. And I think that the parallel with quantum physics, especially, which is, it's a theory of knowledge. It's not a theory of physics, right? It's a misunderstanding. It's a theory of like, if you were to know something outside of you, how powerful is your ability to question the things around you and get answers, right? And if you're allowed to ask complex questions, then you have quantum physics. If you're asking simpler questions that all align very nicely with each other, you have classical physics, Newtonian physics. And so that's what movies, I think, do to me as well. It allows me to think of what if I break this assumption and then I go to its logical conclusion.
Okay, let's, now I want to ask a little bit about, how the process works. And I'm reminded of a time when I was at JPL and I was sitting in on a meeting between a screenwriter and producer and some scientists, but this one was about asteroids, coming and creating havoc and destroying the world. And they were saying, they wanted the skies to be, the producers, the Hollywood people were saying they wanted the skies to get really dark. And I remember the scientists were saying, well, actually, because of all the dust and the reflection or something like that, the skies would get lighter. And the screenwriters were like, no, it needs to get darker. And so I was wondering if you have examples like that where the story does override the science, because like you'd want the skies to get darker.
Well, in this thing that we're working on right now, it takes place in a slightly different time to present day. And one of the rules we set for ourselves is we can give ourselves one buy-in. Like 200 years from now, let's say, maybe there's this one piece of technology that we don't have now. But everything else that we're trying to do is like, it really has to be able to have happened. And I kind of like that. It was actually one of the scientists we're working up with who said that. They said, we would believe that you could have one thing. They were talking about the show The Expanse and the way that the ships move like super quickly, and which doesn't happen in real life. And they were saying, okay, we'll give you that one thing, that you have a piece of technology in the future that will work. You can't have too many of those.
And it's cool too because that scientist is actually a Caltech scientist, and she's really awesome. And I'm glad I was able to bring her on board to, two of them, one from JPL, one from Caltech. But I think for me would be when I was working on the original script for Captain Marvel, and I sat down for a week with the writer, and we came up, I thought, with a really cool story, right? An origin story for Brie Larson's character. And then when he went to, Kevin Feige, he was like, well, this is too complicated, So you can't really be like a quantum expert on cryptography, working in the military, Air Force and all that stuff. And then this like Cree technology is unlocked via quantum error correction and decoding and all that stuff. And I was like, well, okay, what do you want? He's like, I want her to, have lasers or fireballs coming out of your hands. So it's like, yeah, okay, you can do that. I mean, so you can have Hadouken, it's okay. But I don't know if we're gonna go with quantum then. So, but Brie, when I told her about it, she was like, oh man, I wish I was like a quantum expert. That'd be really cool.
Okay, and then are there times when you feel like it's important for like the society to get it right? Like if for example, there are things like genetic engineering and anything with the word nuclear in it that can seem scary and maybe do damage to society if we're always portraying them as scary bad things. So is there a part of your process where you feel like a responsibility to get the science right for the sake of our society?
For me, I would say I care a lot more about, again, the pursuit of understanding than the pursuit of truth, which means that I would much rather work with somebody in the movie industry to try to create clarity than just, and give the public a sense of what does it take to understand something versus what does it take to convince you that this is the answer. Because otherwise, if they don't trust you, and you tell them an answer that they don't want to hear, they probably will withdraw even further into a corner. But if you show them the method that anyone from any side can arrive, right, to some knowledge and understanding, then they can keep that for the rest of their lives.
Yeah, from my end, I always find that whenever I have a message to send, the story is terrible. For me, my hope is that who I am as a person and the things I'm interested in and the things I'm empathetic with will come through in the writing. And so a lot of the ideas in this new thing we're working on are, they are embodied by my beliefs about where we should be as people. But I think once I try to preach that, the stories just fall flat. My responsibility, like yours, but mine is to the story itself. Like what are the basic tenets of the story, and what does the story want to be at its essential core? And when we go back and forth on stuff, Spiros might throw an idea out that I hadn't thought, and we often will say, okay, well, if that's true, then I have to change the story to be this. And then Spiros will say, well, if you're changing the story to be this, then you can't go down that direction. You got to go in that direction, etc. So yeah, I would like certain ideas to get in the conversation. And to me, that's my best hope. My best hope is not to teach anyone a lesson. It's actually to, hey, if something resonates on a deeper level, and most of the things I write are either fun yarns or just silly movies or bad ones. And, they're not going to necessarily ignite much of a conversation. But if they did, people will take it wherever they want to take it. And that's fine with me.
There was actually, I remember you telling me, Ed, there was a point when you were writing No Sudden Move, which is a fantastic movie. I don't know, I think it almost won an Oscar or something. But I was just, good for you there. But at some point you were stuck and you're like, I can't write what I need to write, because you were not like resonating with it, and you cannot ever see yourself have Matt Damon's character like say these words, right?
Right.
I remember you were struggling with it, but when you let go, that was one of the most powerful scenes. For those who have watched the movie, when he just goes on and on about like who he is and who the other person is supposed to be, and they should be in their place, and all that. It was very powerful. And I don't know, as scientists, often we really struggle to see the world from the other point of view, right? For example, the woo-woo science point of view. You can look down on something like that and not even realize, even though you're supposed to be pursuing understanding and have empathy, right? And to me, quantum science, ironically, even though it's supposed to be the most exact theory of physics we have to describe the universe, it inadvertently opens up the possibility for understanding multiple points of view and realizing that the information is not hiding at the thing you're observing. The information was always hiding at the point of view with which you're observing. You may be looking at exactly the same thing as somebody else from a different point of view, and then seeing something contradictory. And there is no contradiction. It's just your point of view is different from theirs, right? That's it. That's all that's going on.
And what I love about that too is I love the notion that there aren't necessarily, well, at least in the things I really enjoy, there aren't necessarily protagonists and antagonists. From one point of view, someone is a protagonist, from another, that protagonist is the antagonist. And to me, that's the most well-rounded of characters. And I think, are our processes the same? I mean, do you go through that when you're trying to figure something out, like that moment of just, I don't know what I'm doing, I can't do this. For me, I don't even know how to write, not even how to write this story. Like everything I start, and I'm in it right now on something where it's like, I don't think I even have the basic skills to do this. And then something unlocks,
Yes, it's unfortunately, this is exactly the same for science, right? You're going down a path and then you have no idea if you're like 5% to the end, -5% if you're to the left of even the path, right? And the best part again is that because you've done it before, maybe once or twice successfully, when you were lost in the woods and then found your way back, then you learn these meta level skills that are good for life. And again, it's this process of trying to create understanding, right? And sometimes, often, I don't even mind admitting that I'll start by Googling something that I don't know. And then once you learn, and you may not even know the right keywords to search for the thing you're looking for. And then as you go down that path, you refine your understanding, and then you get a sense of like, okay, I think I know what's happening.
Well, yeah, I wanted to ask more about the creative process, and you guys are kind of always already going there, but can you say more about how you get your ideas and like the actual process? Like, do you just sit there in a room and think, or do you Google, or do you watch other science fiction movies?
For me, ideas, I don't usually get ideas from watching other movies. To me, it's imperative to constantly try to stay open, constantly try to be involved in the world, constantly try to grow. I've never been short of ideas. And in fact, the problem for me is usually I get too many. I just get too many and I don't know what to do with them. It's about winnowing them down. You can get an idea from anywhere. You can hear just a little swatch of someone's voice, and you can from that just clone a whole character. And then from that character, you get maybe some sense of desire. To me, it's about movement. It's about, once I have a feeling, that a body feeling, not a cerebral feeling, a body feeling of movement, I can feel myself having an emotionally empathic experience with an imagined other character and feel them in one place wanting to go into another. Suddenly there's movement, and then that movement creates images, and then I build. But they can go from any direction. You can start with a plot idea. You can start with a headline from a newspaper. They can start from anywhere. It's a matter of getting into it and then, opening it up so that it has all the varied elements that a story needs, the roundness of the story and the real characters. And
yeah, for me, I guess it was in academia, I think it's a little bit different in the sense that it's a very communal way of coming up with questions that we want to answer. People we respect, students we have that they have some ideas, something they want to look into. But since I started doing outreach about 10 years ago more seriously, I think something shifted in how I even started looking at the research that I wanted to do. And I realized something, and I think we've discussed before, Whitney, about mathematics also, and the difference between mathematics and physics, and maybe there's something else that we're missing that supersedes both of them, right? And gives like a sense of why, both of them are connected in some way. And I went from trying to understand like what is happening, which I think is more like what physics is trying to do. Okay, you observe something, it's like, what is happening here? To how is this happening, where you need to be at the mathematical framework right now. You create mathematical spaces within which you can model what just happened. And then kind of the final question is always the why. Why is this even the right mathematical space? Why do we have these assumptions imbued within the axiomatic foundations of the mathematical space that is supposed to model what we just observed in physical reality? And I started trying to answer the why questions through actually going pretty deeply into mathematics, the foundations of quantum physics, all this stuff. And the reason why I was doing that is because when you go talk to actual third graders, they do not care about the how or the what, okay? They want to know why. Why can't we time travel? Why can't we teleport, right? Why can't I have telepathic powers, telekinetic powers, all this stuff? That's so many human beings care about these things. And I remember there was an interview during the pandemic, if I'm not mistaken, on Mindscape, Sean Carroll's podcast, with Kip Thorne, right? The legend. And he says there, and it really stuck with me, he says in the mid to late 90s, he actually wanted to continue doing research on time travel. But a colleague probably at Caltech said, hey, you should probably stick with LIGO if you want to get a Nobel Prize, okay, and be, considered a serious researcher. And it worked, of course, as we now know, he got the Nobel Prize for that work. But I think there was something in him that was like, I really want to know the answer to these insane science fiction questions. And I think we all do, like every single scientist, and we're slugging through, making progress, seeing patterns, right? With the work we're doing, which is really fantastic, by the way, modern, progress in quantum gravity, all that stuff. But yeah, I'm trying to focus. I have, I guess, more of a luxury of focusing on the why, and then saying, well, but I do that because I work with movie people and with kids. So yeah.
Okay, let's go to our writing prompt exercise now. Speaking of how you work together. So what we're going to do is I'm going to throw out a concept, and then Ed is going to.
I have to write something?
No, yeah, you have to basically throw out one of your ideas to Spiros. And
Okay.
but Spiros, I think you're going to need to give some definition because it's about quantum superposition.
Oh, I see. Yeah.
So, basically, from my, unscientific knowledge, it's when a particle is in two places at once, but maybe this could happen on larger scales where a person is in two places at once. So basically, Ed,
Yes.
can you think of an idea that has something to do with people being in quantum superposition? And then we're going to have Spiros talk about that.
Okay, I first of all can't promise it'll be a good idea coming off the top of my head, but so let's say I'll just throw something out. Like a guy goes to the office, a guy goes to work, gets out of his car, walks through the parking lot, walks into the office, sees himself sitting there, and then let's say I had that idea, and I was like, hey, so I would call Spiros and say, hey, I want to do a science fiction thing about a guy who sees himself, so they exist simultaneously, same guy. How would I do that? I'd probably just call him, especially this early. And then you would say,
have the technology. Yeah.
What does that mean? And then
I see. Yeah, I think I would say first, this sounds like, a cool concept. And, maybe ask a little bit further about where do you want to take this? Do they get to interact? Because from a quantum physics point of view, quantum superposition, which is actually like an answer to Whitney's earlier question, there's this misunderstanding that an object can be in quantum superposition in multiple states at the same time. From their point of view, they're always in a single state. It is from a different point of view from the outside, which is, not aligned with the same dimensions, where you see that object potentially like be flickering between two different places. Because from our point of view, we have an intuition that tells us, well, you can either be here or there, but not at the same time in both places. But from their point of view, from the internal point of view, they're just, I'm right here. There's no weirdness. So I would say to Ed, well, in a way that works, because the camera is always the one looking from the outside and is the one that shows one of them walking in and then seeing themselves sitting down there. But from their point of view, they don't know that there is anyone in front of them. We get to see from the outside. Yeah.
Sorry, didn't mean to cut you off. My next question to you would be, but what if I wanted them, okay, is it better for them to never see each other and they're both living the same life, kind of crossing paths? Let's say it's a guy and he's married. Does his wife see, does he show up, and then leave, and then the other him shows up and leaves, or do they not exist in even the same plane?
Yeah, that would be, the wife would have to be dislodged from this point of view, this reality, and be shifted in a new basis, as we call it, like a new set of dimensions along which she would intuitively understand what everyone else sees like as localized over here or over there. And then she would be freaking out and be like, okay, wait, what just happened? But if that's not the case, then no, it would be almost as if the camera and us as the viewers, via the proxy of the camera, we get to actually occupy this new point of view that is kind of crazy, we're not used to, and we get to see these two worlds non-interacting, but from our point of view, may just go and sit right there and start like typing something and not even know that there's a ghost version of him in this parallel universe, just doing the same thing 2 minutes earlier. And
just for the example, since we're doing an example, let's say the idea was pitched to, let's say a studio or a director came to me with this idea and it was really important to them. I'm just going to come up with a terrible notion, total cliche, but it would be like, they really want this to be, there was a lab accident and there's two of them. And so I go to you and I go, I'm stuck here because it seems like a lame idea. How can we make that cool? Like, if for, you know, that wouldn't be quantum then, right? It would be.
Well, actually, that is exactly the question I got from Marvel Studios like 3 years ago for Ant-Man and the Wasp, because there is an accident, right? And Goliath, the scientist, his daughter, I think, is also there. And then through this quantum explosion, she becomes someone who is in superposition, right? And shifts in and out of this particular reality where the rest of the world is experiencing, you know, what is happening. And that's what I told them. It's almost like she's in a quantum superposition with multiple realities. And what we get to see, it's almost a stroboscopic effect of like her appearing and disappearing from our reality and also being at different places. And that's the ghost. That's why she can tunnel through stuff and all these things. So yeah, it already happened. Sorry.
I already did that. All right. Well, we're at the half-hour point. So let's move on to some questions from the audience. And the first question we have here is from Karen Matthews and Grady Booch. They say, is there a specific film or TV which stands out for its accurate scientific foundation? What about the least accurate?
Do I really want to answer this? So there's many that are least accurate. But again, to me, least accurate is more about not even doing the basic amount of homework, right? Not even picking up the phone and saying, hey, scientist, does the phrase utilitarian wormholes sound good? Is there ever a thing like that, right? And say like, what? You know, those words never go together. But maybe you mean traversable wormholes? You know, starting even there before you even go deeper into the concept of how would you use them in a movie. So I'm talking about the Adam Project, for example, that was on Netflix recently. But for movies that have done a good job, at the top would be Bill and Ted Face the Music, I'm sure. You know, quantum accuracy was extreme. No, I think the best movies in my mind are the ones like The Martian or Interstellar, the ones that end up calling up a scientist and saying, hey, we want to listen to you, spend a couple of hours with you to get a sense of like how your mind works. So whenever they do that, not only do I give them a free pass, I'm like, I will tell my friends, go watch this movie, because you can tell there's a quality to this.
That's a really big thing you just said about getting inside the mind of, because that's actually more than getting facts. It's about getting in the way, understanding the way, like for instance, you might think about something or another scientist might think about something, because you can actually clone, as I used that word before, like clone a lot from that. And that takes you down the road quite a ways until I hit a wall and go, hey, Spiros, I'm stuck. Did this ever, you know, make sense? On Now You See Me, the movie, it was about with magicians, and it was a very similar thing. It was getting into most of my research was about getting into the mindset of a magician, learning how a magician thinks about their work and their art and their craft. And once I was, and it took a long time and took me meeting with a lot of people. But once I was able to do that, I could start writing magic tricks and writing magic stuff. And sometimes they'd be bad, but that's when you'd go to a real magician and say, you know, okay, this is what I came up with. And you always have to brace yourself to be just hammered and go, is it real? Is it not real? And we had this, I had the inverse of that on Men in Black, which was early on, and oh, hi Grady, by the way, and thanks for your question. Early on, very early in the process, when Tommy Lee Jones came aboard Men in Black, he was like, you know, what are you doing? It's either science fiction or it's comedy, but make up your mind. And then he used a not a bad word, and that he called me. And my argument to him was, it will never be good enough science fiction to be dramatic. The science in this is so lame that it needs the leap of faith you make with a comedy. You know, it needs to be a comedy, so you aren't questioning, you know, it's all context, right? Heavy-handed science fiction better sure as hell get the science right. But if it's, if it's a comedy, you have certain leaps you can make, because everyone is involved in the mood of joy or whatever is being created. But let's move on so I don't, use up all the time.
Okay. All right. Next question is from Tim Lynch. What are some of your favorite media depictions of scientists themselves and how they behave? And of course, this is making me think of Don't Look Up, because the scientists were the main characters in that.
Mine is the very, the woman with the glasses and her hair pulled back who doesn't realize she's beautiful, so she takes her glasses off. And no, I'm kidding. That's like the worst, I want to swear, Hollywood cliche of the scientist with what I hate are the scientists who are obviously just not scientists. That really pisses me off. Any cliche version that Hollywood will present, but this really
that's a really great question. In fact, I was going to answer in the previous one that one of the other reasons why I appreciate some movies and the ones the directors or producers or writers who call us up is that they get to meet us. And then we get to bring other scientists also into the fold, like we're doing with this recent thing I'm working on with Ed. And then get to see what real scientists look like, how they think, how they smile, right? Their little tics and idiosyncrasies and all that stuff, what they wear, all these things. So instead of coming up with random science and also random scientists, right? The stereotype of a crazy haired scientist or this or that, they get to see real people. And that makes a difference, right?
Because we're all just people trying to figure out our lives and, we have a little passion. It's a narrow passion. We devote our life to it. And we're just trying our best, we're just, and it demystifies it a bit. And one of the things, with the interactions with all the people who have done deep study and stuff is they know some really cool stuff. And just a piece of information from that can open your mind to a whole set of possibilities you wouldn't have thought about. That's what I love about any research with anyone who has done deep dives in any field. Because
there's something else, by the way, like I wanted to add there quickly, there's a feedback loop that we get to then see the next generation look more diverse because the movies of that previous generation showed a better representation, right? Got it right, not just the science, but the scientists. And then people can see themselves and can say, I want to be that. For so many of us, it's because of that.
Okay, let's go on to this one from Benjamin Peltz. What scientific concept represents untapped potential for movies and TV? Any concept you wish you could explore on film or TV? I mean, we've seen a lot of multiverse for one thing. So what's the next frontier? Even though I love the multiverse.
Actually, yeah, the movie Everything Everywhere All at Once, I just watched it earlier this week and it was fantastic, I thought. I think we should explore this even further. The concept of interfering universes in the multiverse, the what if, even if in the end you get to see as one human being, but because we have this ability as humans to simulate realities that never will be, but then make choices in this one based on that other version of ourselves. Do we want to be that person, right? Do we want to split and go that path? And we have to always choose one versus the other, but I think there is a lot more potential down that path, where you get to deal with the consequences of your choice versus, hey, I'm just trying to use a multiverse like Doctor Strange to save the universe. I think I want to see more personal responsibility from that point of view.
Okay, Ed, any other ideas for you?
I wouldn't know how to answer what great science terrain has not been covered. So let's move on to another. So
okay.
Yeah.
I mean, personally, I would say entanglement, like a rom-com with entanglement.
Just call it entanglement. Or I
think there's a movie literally called Entanglement.
Oh, there is.
Is there really?
Entanglement, yeah, probably a rom-com.
Okay, well, Ed, please write that movie for me.
Whitney will star.
Yes. Okay, let's go to another one. This one is from Nicholas Chandler. How do you avoid alienating and confusing the audience with science in a story, especially in a low budget film where your intention would be to get across the big ideas with as little money spent as possible? Then he says, big fan of Ed's work. Your work on Bill and Ted is a big reason why I want to make it as a screenwriter.
Well, first of all, thank you. I really, really, really appreciate that. I always feel that, well, studios always try and make everything general and make it in sort of lowest common denominator. But my argument is always that the more specific you can get, actually, the more general. And what I mean by that is a character speaking specifically about what they do and, and using words that are very specific to their field. An audience is smart and they can get what's going on emotionally under that. When you get bogged down is when you're trying to make facts happen. The key to me is that all the facts ride on the back of a character and on the back of an emotional desire, a want of a person. And it's really a story about human beings. It's that all we're watching is human beings interacting. No matter what the background is, you've got to tie your ideas. They're actually secondary to the people, in your story. So that's the most important thing, I think.
Yeah, for me, I would say that one of the most frustrating things whenever I watch a movie that has any science in it is when the writer pretends that they are a scientific genius and they write as one. And of course, what they do, there's a bunch of technobabble that makes no sense, which is okay if you don't take yourself seriously. Once they take themselves seriously and then end up in the movie talking down to someone else who is not a scientist, that just pisses me off, right? Because I know they don't know anything about what they're talking about, right? And more importantly, they're talking down to someone else, which is terrible. It's like the more understanding you have of how the world works, the more you realize how little you know. And the more open you are to having discussions and appreciating the fact that all the information and the richness of the universe is in relationships between things, not in the things, in the genius, right? In the prodigy and all that stuff. It's more like, how do they interact with the ones around them?
Okay. All right. One more. This one's an interesting one from Paul Gill. I'm working on an extremely non-linear story and finding it tricky to structure into a linear screenplay. Any tips on bridging it? Of course, this is making me think of quantum physics, which isn't necessarily linear itself. So maybe he needs to make it about quantum physics.
I would say, think about how you would tell the story, as Spiros was saying, to a third grader. Think about how you would tell the story to someone you're sitting next to on a chairlift. Just, you have 10 minutes to ride up with a stranger and they say, what are you working on? You innately know how to tell a story. And the key there is to think about who you're telling it to. There's good versions of thinking of your audience and bad. The bad version of thinking of your audience is, what are people going to want to buy? What are people going to want to go see? You're lost from the beginning there. The good version is, what do they understand? Where is their frame of mind at any given moment? And what are they feeling at any given moment? Think about your story and the coolest way to tell it that way, and don't get too bogged down in a structure ahead of a story. The structure will naturally emerge out of the story you're telling. And if the story you're telling requires a nonlinear, format, it'll emerge that way simply because you're thinking about a story you're telling to people, not because you're thinking, what is the proper structure for this kind of thing? The structure will be there if you think about just relating it to another human being and think about where their head is at as you're relating it.
We'll add something very quick here, that go slow, take it slow, go small, right? Don't try to do too much. A single idea, well explained, can blow anyone's mind, Nobel Prize winner or not. Okay. The things that we are missing still in the theory of everything, for example, are so fundamental that once we understand, we may look back and say, oh my goodness, how didn't we think of that for thousands of years? It's such it's an invisible thing that will become so obvious. It will not be extremely technical, it will be the opposite. And then once we get that, if you can do that in a movie, where you just a single concept simply expanded throughout the whole movie, can leave people wanting more.
Small, simple, human, moment to moment to moment is your story. That's what it is.
All right, I think that's a good way to end it. It's 11:45. And so, yes, thank you everybody for joining us. Thank you so much, Ed and Spiros, for being here.
Thank you so much for having us. Yeah,
Thank you to the people who watch this. Really appreciate it.
appreciate you coming over.
Yes, thanks. And sorry we couldn't get to all the questions. The next conversation in this series will be on May 25th with Professor Nai-Chang Ye about harnessing quantum science to make the materials of the future. In the meantime, if you're interested in learning more about the bizarre world of quantum physics and want to at least attempt to understand things like superposition and entanglement at a deeper level, check out the Caltech Science Exchange. The site provides clear explanations of not just quantum physics, but other topics in science and technology, like climate change and COVID-19. Find it at scienceexchange.caltech.edu. Thanks.